During slavery, pain, tears, and blood flowed abundantly due to the constant abuses and punishments suffered by the slaves. As we delve into the horrific realities of slavery in America, we are plunged into a world of unimaginable suffering. Their lives were characterized by ongoing loss, emotional suffering, and physical suffering. Slavery robbed them not only of their freedom, but also of their identity and dignity. Over the decades, however, slaves found ways to resist and survive, often cultivating unwavering fortitude in the face of adversity. Over time, the struggles and sacrifices of slaves gave rise to resistance and abolitionist movements. Though the road to emancipation was long and arduous, abolition eventually came, freeing slaves from physical chains, but leaving deep scars in their communities even to this day. As an exercise in memory, today I bring you the 10 most horrific punishments that white slave owners inflicted on their slaves. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications. Number 10. Whipping. The best-known method of torture in the history of slavery is the whip. If a slave made a mistake, tried to rebel, or simply failed to perform a task, he or she was punished. The thing is, whippings were not reserved for just male slaves, but also pregnant women and even children. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, if the owner noticed that the slave's wounds were healing, he would order them reopened, and things like salt or red pepper would be poured on them. Some even speculate that they would grind bricks into powder and sprinkle it on the wound. Number 9. Mutilation. In extremely rare cases, slaves would have some part of their body mutilated. When I say extremely rare, it's because it really was. The integrity of the slave was important, so a slave without arms or legs could not work properly and therefore wouldn't have much value. However, this did not stop them, because if the slave seriously angered the owner, he would mutilate them, from an ear or a finger to amputating a leg or an arm. Number 8. Branding. How does a cattle herder keep from losing his cattle to theft? More often than not, they would brand them with an extremely hot metal on some part of their skin. This was usually done by large companies to prevent theft and the resale of their slaves. Number 7. Being smoked alive. Runaway slave. William W. Brown described a common practice in Virginia that was horrifying. He went on to describe how his owner would have his slaves tied up and subdued in a smokehouse. He would then light a fire with tobacco stalks, suffocating and smoking them as an additional punishment. More often than not, the slaves would not make it out alive. Number 6. The pig's head. Runaway slave Moses Roper wrote a book describing his entire life. In this book, he mentions that the slave owners actually saw corporal punishment as an enjoyable sport and would spend afternoons trying to come up with the painful and humiliating ways to punish their slaves. In his book, he describes a white slave owner who hammered nails into a large barrel and left the tips of the nails sticking out of the inside. His slaves were placed in these barrels and then rolled down long, steep hills while the owner and other slaves watched. Number 5. Suspended under a cooking fire. Another favorite punishment for white slave owners was to tie up a slave, suspend him above the ground, and start a fire above him. A fatty piece of pork was cooked by the fire. Then, the burning fat dripped onto the bare skin of the slave. Number 4. Demotion or sale. George Washington was a big fan of whipping and other forms of corporal punishment as disciplinary measures for slaves. Furthermore, he supported the practice of downgrading slaves who were perceived as not working diligently enough, and the sale of slaves who attempted to escape multiple times. For those enslaved individuals engaged in less physically demanding roles, such as housework or skilled trades, there was the looming threat of being reassigned to grueling field work. This transfer often subjected them to harsher physical conditions, more strenuous labor, and frequently led to heightened levels of abuse from both slave owners and overseers. In the most distressing scenarios, these individuals were sold at reduced prices to new owners with notorious reputations for mistreating slaves, sometimes even pushing them to their death. Number 3. Public burnings. Punishments were often made public. Other slaves were forced to watch as a warning that they should behave or be disciplined the same way. Slaves were either tied to a stake or above a fire. Some slaves fainted or passed out from smoke inhalation before the fire began to consume their bodies. But many were tortured by the flames before they finally died. And even after the abolition of slavery, public burnings, lynchings, and hangings continued into the 20th century. Number 2. Chaining. Historically, chains and slavery have been synonymous. It started on slave ships, where captured Africans were tightly shackled together in the cramped hulls of the ships. Chains were also persistently used as a form of punishment for repeat runaway slaves, who were either tethered to their workstations or physically linked to other enslaved individuals. In certain instances, rows of slaves were chained together to perform menial tasks in unison. This practice laid the foundation for the establishment of chain gangs, which later became famous in prison systems across the United States. Number 1. Forced reproduction. As if the sexual abuse and exploitation suffered by slaves were not enough. In addition to the rape of some of them, they were also forced to reproduce among themselves. It was never taken into consideration if they forced a slave to have relations with his mother, his cousin, his sister, or anyone else. The purpose of this was to gain more manpower on a plantation, and thus were born the slave breeding farms, which were created to reproduce and sell slaves. Women who became pregnant as a result of this abuse rarely received any medical care, and in fact, were often treated worse by their white slave owners, particularly their wives. Undoubtedly, this dark chapter leaves a painful mark on the pages of American history, revealing the depths of cruelty by those who wrongly deemed themselves superior. That wraps up today's video. If you found it informative, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications to stay updated on our latest content. Until next time, let's continue to reflect on our past, learn from it, and strive for a brighter future. Thank you for watching.